Hello and welcome to the Student Council Podcast, an educational advice show made for students and by students, where everyone is qualified to talk about their own experiences. My name is Carter Dvorak, and today I am so excited to be joined by the team behind Compass Health. That is Kishor, Aparna, and Grant. Welcome, all three of you. Thank you so much for coming on. Before we get into anything, I'd love to hear what have been your favorite 5 minutes of the past week.
Ooh, I like this. Oh, I got one. It is Compass related. So I think we'll kind of talk about Compass in a minute, obviously, right? But a big thing that we're trying to do as part of the platform is kind of collaborate closely with the university. So I got an email like a week or 2 weeks ago about a conference on campus. It was called the Depression on College Campuses Conference. It's like the most depressing conference name. And I was like looking into it, and a lot of the people that are kind of involved with, guiding student life at Michigan and kind of like mental health resource access, we're going to be there and they were going to be speaking, right? I also happen to be very interested in this type of thing. Again, even though it sounds depressing, which, part of it was, but, so I went to the conference this week, and one of the people that we've really been trying to get in touch with, was kind of, giving the keynote speech. I was in the very front row, was like one of like 5 students there. It was very like businessy type of conference, right? It's just a bunch of administrators from across the country like convening to talk about this, right? And I kind of ambushed her as she was getting off stage and kind of got to talk to her for 5 minutes or five or so minutes, kind of telling her about Compass, kind of hearing about what she thinks the state of the university is in terms of mental health access. It was a great surprise because I didn't think she would actually. I thought she would like go behind stage to like some like reclusive room. Like I didn't know she was actually just gonna like go back and sit in her seat. So that was a fun moment this week. I'm glad I got to talk to her.
That's awesome. I'm really glad that got to happen. It sounds like a very fascinating conference, if not a little bit depressing, but definitely had a lot of really interesting stuff.
I was into it. I feel like many other people would probably be falling asleep. I did see one person fall asleep, during the keynote, but most everyone there was like very, again, passionate about, kind of helping students figure out their mental health during a very crucial period of their time, right? So I got to meet some amazing people while I was there, and I'm glad they made it open to students as well. I thought that was very nice of them.
Yeah, that's a great thing to have as open to students for sure. Anybody else have any big things from the week that they want to talk about?
I can bring this up briefly. I mean, also kind of Compass related. One thing we're doing now that we have our initial platform out and we have some engagement is we're trying to see, what can we do to go a little bit above and beyond when it comes to some of the features on our website. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of the hype about like ChatGPT and all this. For the first time, I was actually able to look at it from a kind of more computer science / development standpoint. And, obviously it's all in the pipeline right now, but just the ability to kind of play around and explore and try and see like, how can we use this cutting edge technology? Can we use this cutting edge technology in our platform? And, how do we go about doing that? How are the mechanics? Like I was able to build a small prototype that helped us answer some questions. So I thought that was really fascinating. It's, as they say, it's like nowadays, if you want to build a car, you start by like assembling the pieces together. You don't start by mining your own metal. A lot of the CS classes that we take in college, it's like, yeah, they teach you how to mine the metal and then like smelt it and then put it together, blah, blah, blah. And then you finally have a car. But when you're coding on your own, you can kind of just bang things together and kind of hope for the best. And I think you can get like a bit of like leapfrog results. So that was, obviously it took a little bit more than 5 minutes, I will admit. But at least the result, which probably took around 5 minutes, was I thought was pretty electric.
That's incredible. That's so cool. Compass GPT.
I'd say for me, it was probably similar to Grant. I got to attend the Global Health Equity Conference and got to meet Dr. Tedros, the general director of the World Health Organization. So that was definitely the highlight of the week for sure.
That's amazing. That's such a cool opportunity. Wow.
You get to shake his hand, right, Aparna?
Yes.
That is crazy.
That is crazy. That is so, so cool. Yeah. Now, I'm really excited to get into Compass, and you all seem super passionate about that. I want to first just kind of get a little bit of background, hear about all of your kind of college experiences here at University of Michigan. So what are you all kind of studying now? What are your plans either kind of post-graduation, and how has your years gone so far?
Yeah, so I can start here. I am studying computer science. I'm a senior this year, which is like terrifying to say out loud. And I've been very passionate about healthcare since the start of my college career. I originally wanted to be a doctor, and then I took a bit of organic chemistry and absolutely hated it. And I was like, if organic chemistry is the one thing between me and going to medical school, then I really shouldn't be a doctor, right? Which is like a very classic like Michigan freshman thing to do. So figured I didn't want to do that, right? Had a very windy path that led to computer science after that. And, kind of got into computer science because I wanted to make an impact in healthcare from a systems perspective, right? I feel like technology is a fantastic way to do that, right? If you're careful with it. So that's kind of, a little bit about my like academic background at Michigan so far. Kind of met these two people right here through an organization we were in called Blueprints for Pangea, which takes excess medical supplies from US hospitals and ships them overseas, right? So got to, that was a great place to meet a lot of other people that were passionate about healthcare, right? And then, when I was kind of thinking about this idea about a year and a half ago, I couldn't think of two better people to loop in, right? In terms of what I'm doing after college, I will be working at a small healthcare startup in Manhattan. So super excited about that.
Yeah, that's so exciting. That's a really great story. It's really cool. I had not known about that Blueprints for Pangea Club before, but that seems like a really awesome initiative.
Yes, also check that out. I was in leadership for a better part of my college career. And the things we do there are amazing. And I think we like get to have kind of a scary amount of impact for college students. They're actually running a functioning nonprofit. And like given a level of responsibility that is kind of terrifying for a bunch of 19, 20, 21-year-olds, right? Still get to have a lot of impact and, surrounded by amazing people. So definitely check that out too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll link in the show notes for sure for anybody curious about that.
I just want to echo off of one thing that Grant said, which is what I would call like irresponsible amounts of responsibility. And I think the key is to like how I've kind of led my college career. That's the little fruits that I have been able to procure, I think it all comes from that. So, I think, I wish I was able to be in Blueprints, in leadership and Blueprints. It's a really awesome organization. And I was able to meet these two great people, but my path is a little bit different. I study industrial engineering and data science here. Reasons are, again, it was a winding path, and no reason to get like too into the nitty gritty details as to why those two things in particular. But anyway, those two degrees have been able to afford me, I think, a good amount of experience in different fields, everything from, software engineering to manufacturing to procurement to data science. So I've been able to run the gamut in terms of experiences, which is cool. And then full time, I'm going into consulting. And that's because I think, of all the different experiences that I've had, and the ones that I enjoyed the most, the number one thing that I was attracted to was the strategy behind whatever we're doing. Implementation was fine. I could do it. I enjoyed it. But what got me up in the morning was the strategy and the approach. I know that consultants, especially strategy consultants, and I'm getting into strategy consulting, that's what we're literally paid to do for a living. So it seemed like the natural next step. And additionally, I always think that life's about learning. And early on in the career, I just wanted a place that was relatively safe for me to learn a lot about a couple of industries that I'm interested in. And consulting just seemed like the natural next step. But at a high level, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, funny thing there, Kish said, life is very much about learning. I think he's literally the physical manifestation of that. The first time I actually met him was in Mary Markley Hall. He had a drink in one hand and the Wall Street Journal in another. And I was like, this is an interesting person. And then kind of the rest is history, right? Point is though, he took it literally, which I think is amazing, right? Because I think, college is definitely the time for that. And it shouldn't have to stop at college either, right? But yeah.
That's incredible. That's a wonderful beating story for sure.
For me, I would say I kind of jumped around a lot freshman year as well. And it was actually Kishor that I had this conversation with in Blueprints for some kind of Blueprints social that we had virtually during COVID. And I was like thinking about like data science or some kind of like technical approach to healthcare, and eventually talking and doing Blueprints a little bit more and talking to different people and learning, eventually realized that public health might be better for me. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in the School of Public Health. I'm a junior studying community and global public health, and it's a perfect balance with like the technical side of things and also like the social justice approach. And after college, I'm hoping to go to med school. So that's the trajectory.
That's so exciting. I feel like I haven't talked to so many people in School of Public Health here, but it's really cool that you're involved in that. And it seems like it's a very multifaceted place, which is awesome.
Yes, it definitely is.
Yeah. Now, I'd love to talk about the initiative of the hour, Compass Health. I'm super curious if you guys kind of want to talk about what Compass is, how did you really start it, and kind of what were each of your roles in creating this really, really cool thing?
Yeah, I can talk about a little bit how it started and then kind of talk about the little product. And then maybe each of us can get into, kind of our roles at Compass. But, the funny thing about how it started is I was literally sitting in my living room one day, like watching TV. I think this was during COVID too, if I remember correctly. And one of our friends bursts in the door, like absolutely bursts in the door, like huffing and puffing, and is like holding up his arm, which is like clearly broken. And I'm like, hello, what are you doing? What's going on here? And he's like, listen, dude, I broke my arm. I'm not sure, what to do. And I was like, what you should have done is go anywhere but my house. Why are you here? And he basically said, I did not know where else to go, which, kind of put a light bulb in my head, right? And though, this is a very simplistic kind of view of the problem on campus, but it made me realize that, students really struggle to find healthcare on campus when they're not feeling their best, right? This kind of made me reflect on my own healthcare journey at Michigan too. I'm constantly sick, unfortunately, especially freshman year. And kind of, getting those appointments with the UHS was kind of difficult. I wasn't sure if it was the best place to go. I sought therapy for the first time after COVID and like really struggled to find a therapist on campus right at the end of the school year. Which again was very frustrating, especially as someone that was kind of scared to seek therapy for the first time, right? It kind of made me think about all these things and kind of start to get the wheels turning on what a solution could be, right? So I talked to Kishor about the idea when it was definitely just in the ideas phase. And he absolutely, ruminated with him because he'd had kind of similar experiences with health, right? And kind of the rest is history. And we brought in Aparna as we grew, right? What the product is kind of compiling all of the healthcare resources on campus into one searchable, filterable, kind of discoverable platform, right? So with our platform, you can easily search and filter through, these endless options for healthcare on campus to find the perfect fit for you, right? And I think that's the kind of the key part, because I feel like there's not currently a central repository of this information on campus, which is a shame because a lot of these resources, are fantastic resources that are actually completely free of charge for students, right? And kind of the current scheme of things is from a student's perspective is, okay, I'm really struggling to find care. I don't really feel like going through the rigmarole of going through all these 15 different university websites to find, what the best resource would be for me, right? So what I'm going to do is probably just go to UHS, probably going to just go to CAPS, go to urgent care, or even worse off, not seek care at all, because, it's just too much of a hassle, right? Even if those 4 options are not the best fit for care and there might be a better one, right? So that's kind of, again, a little bit about how Compass was started, a little bit about kind of the problem we're trying to solve and kind of, a little bit about the product itself.
Yeah, it's such a great website and such a great initiative. And it's, it's funny, you were talking about reflecting on like your experiences being sick freshman year of college. I can very much talk about that and how I think the first week of every month up until February, I had some level of cold or viral illness. And so when I heard about Compass, and I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely much needed and a great resource. So I was just super excited to hear about it and so excited to talk to you all more about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Glad it, kind of ruminates with you as well. Maybe we can kind of talk about each of us, kind of what we do at Compass. Maybe that'll be a good idea. I can start. I kind of handle all of the engineering type of stuff, so kind of the design of the platform, making sure the wheels keep turning behind the scenes, right? And kind of help with a little bit of everything else here and there, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do, at least.
What I'll say briefly is, I'm very grateful that Grant brought the idea to me first. And it was mentioned earlier, right? I've struggled a decent amount with health on campus, and luckily I had a network of people that could get me the resources that I need. But in the case that I didn't have that, I would have really been stranded. So in terms of my Compass story, briefly, yes, one part of it was just the merit of the idea, and I resonated with that 100%, as Grant just mentioned. But I think the other big thing is it's the human capital of this group that really wanted me to work 10 times harder for Compass. Obviously, we have a million things going on. All of us, we're in college. We have this, we have that to worry about. You can definitely make excuses for prioritizing certain things over of others and not prioritizing things at all. But it's really the respect I have for the other people on this call that really made me want to kind of go all in on Compass. So I think that's just one thing that I would be sad if I didn't get to mention that on this podcast, which is that there are 2 aspects of this, right? There's the idea itself, but you can have a $1 trillion idea, but if you don't like the people that you're working with, and if it's if you're not motivated by them and you don't have that unwavering amount of respect for them, is it really worth it at the end of the day? So I would say that's something that I need to kind of emphasize. As for my specific role, I think I see myself a lot as like a support function. So we have obviously the product, but we need to market that, right? So I try and help out with that. I try and help out with promoting our idea. I also, given my background, I've gotten more into the engineering side of things. So I'm starting to work on certain programs that help better our search functionality, for example. But I think a lot of what I do is I support the build effort of the product, and I make sure that it's as well known as possible. And then, it's hard to provide a specific description of a role, just given how new this idea is. Anybody who's worked in a small environment knows the number of hats that you got to wear to get anything done. I think the majority of my work is non-technical at the moment. In the next week, I imagine that's going to change. I think the majority of my work will be technical in the next week or so. So it's hard to put a finger on it. But at the end of the day, right, I think if I could say what I am, it's kind of I like to think that I'm kind of helping the operation go along in some way or the other.
Yeah, it's funny. I think one of the last final things we did to the website before we kind of made it live was made a team page, which we were didn't really care too much about, because we were focused on just the product, right? But but we're wait, people probably want to know that there's faces, actual human beings behind this product, right? And when we were thinking about the roles to put for each of us, we're what the heck do we put, right? Because we have general specialties, I guess, but week by week we are doing things completely different, and it's kind of on this collective goal to build the product to be as best it can be and kind of serve as many students as it can, right? So I think that's just one of the funny quirks about a very, very early startup or product, right? Is not only does no one have a very defined role, right? Usually you're kind of working together to kind of cover each other's stuff. I mean, kind of do what needs to be done week by week. But also, again, I think with an early team, it's so important that you trust each other, right? I see a lot of instances of people starting their own, companies or startups or businesses, where, they really are not that close, or they don't really know their founding team, right? They don't know the people that they're working with. Well, they just need an engineer, for example, to do what needs to be done, right? And, I feel you're missing a huge kind of, a huge thing there when you don't really trust the people you're working with, right? I think probably, if I'm remembering correctly, there's this company that always puts out surveys to startups every year, and they found the number one reason for startups failing was because founders disagree with each other, right? And I think that's again why Kishor and I, at least made a really good team from the very beginning, because we always trusted each other. We're not afraid to disagree with each other. It doesn't mean you have to not disagree, right? And everything has to be perfect all the time. But when we do disagree, we trust each other enough to where, okay, we're disagreeing not because we hate each other, but because we want this to be the best it can be, right? So I think for all the students out there, hopefully listening to this, definitely keep that in mind when you hopefully want to start your own businesses, right?
It's a great piece of advice for starting any big initiative or product or business, that the team is such a crucial element. And I've learned that, I think, both from really great teams and teams that aren't necessarily in that mold. And so it's such an important lesson to understand that when you do a big venture, it has to be done with the right people in mind. And I'm glad from everything I've heard from you three that really seems to be the case. And that's really awesome.
Yeah. And again, you definitely have to have a great idea. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of, venture capital firms these days, for example, are more looking at the people on the team than the product itself, right? Because they know if they don't want the product to fail, right? But they know if it does fail, they're still supporting a very awesome team that can work together, that can, think creatively, and stuff like that, right? So just, again, something to keep in mind. I'll hammer that again. But Aparna, I'll let you go. What is your kind of role in Compass? Because I think you've probably had the most variety of things you've done.
Yeah, well, quickly echoing off of what you just said, Grant, I think because we've all have different backgrounds, one of my favorite things about being in Compass has been learning from everyone here. And I mentioned earlier, I wanted to maybe do some kind of technical background with engineering or data science or something like that. And now I don't really have that major, but still feel I'm getting a lot out of it from working with Kishor and Grant. So that's been something really cool at Compass. But as far as my role, I have kind of done several different things, but I joined probably around a year ago now, and with mostly collecting a lot of the data that we've been putting into the platform of with the resources and everything, and then shifted a little bit to doing some of the user testing to get feedback for the first versions of our platform, and now shifting back again to doing some of the data collection for feedback that we're getting as people mention maybe things to add or change from the platform. So kind kind of doing a variety of different things, but I think the main thing about Compass is definitely been the fact that, like, I guess I too also had a similar experience of like trying to struggle finding healthcare on campus, and I ended up going home 2 weeks because I just didn't know what to do on campus when I was sick. And so now I feel like there's some sort of a solution out there. And, if I had gone back and told myself sophomore year, beginning of that year, I would have had something else to do instead of just going home. So that's definitely been a couple thoughts right there.
Certainly. Yeah, that's really cool. It is cool that you guys all kind of can go back and tell your past selves who were dealing with these healthcare issues, like, hey, like, we did something about this and we made a solution to it. And I think that's a really special thing to get to go and do. I think we've really touched on it a lot, but I am just really curious, like, on truly like a broad perspective, like, what do you think the really big importance is of having like college students having healthcare access, especially as they're kind of entering into the world, I think for the first time outside of, like kind of really having to navigate a lot of things on their own?
I think from a public health perspective, and Aparna can definitely talk about this with her background too, college is the one time where we are eating, playing, studying, working, sleeping in the same geographic location, right? And I think from like a healthcare intervention standpoint, there's a lot of opportunity there, right? College is definitely a pivotal time of your life, right? And a lot of college students develop like lifelong healthcare habits during this like arbitrary 4 to 5 year period, right? So the why college students part, that's definitely kind of, one of our drivers. And, that is our, key background as well. And, kind of we've been through it firsthand. And again, I think that's a huge kind of value add of our platform, is that it's made with the student in mind, Now, why do we need to have this central repository? I touched on it a little bit, but, kind of the main thing, and I learned this at this conference too, I just went to this week, the main thing that any type of patient, especially college students though, the main thing that they value in any healthcare experience is time, the time that it takes to register, the time it takes to find a provider. That they want that time factor to be as low as possible. And if you give them product A and product B, even if one product is better than the other, if it takes longer to get what they want, they're going to go with the other product, right? I think the landscape of healthcare, again, especially with college students, is changing, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't value having like a lifelong relationship with a primary care provider anymore, for example, right? They would rather be able to immediately within 5 minutes get access to a doctor on their cell phone, right? And so that's kind of why we think it's important to have this central repository, right? Because if we can limit the time it takes for students to make a decision of where to find care, if we can route them to the best type of care for them, as quickly as possible, then they're more likely to go out and seek it and utilize this care, right? And, that just leads to, also them being able to kind of carry these healthcare finding habits into the future, right? And kind of learn to, again, go through this process of finding care. And it might be a little harder once they leave college because they might not have Compass, but, they'll still kind of have that skill set of, okay, I'm going to really think about, what I value in a healthcare provider. Because again, this is really important, right? So that's a little bit about why I think it's important. Kish, I saw you were about to speak.
Sure. Grant, you touched upon a lot of things that I was going to bring up. The main thing I think is like, when you come from high school to college, you're put in a new environment, you're expected to act as a, functioning adult, responsible adult. There's also this thing about having more freedom, but there are certain things that are not taught. You probably see a lot of memes on TikTok or wherever about, oh, like no one taught me how to do my taxes. Nobody taught me how to do this. Nobody taught me how to do that. But whatever, the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell, right? So you kind of, I'm trivializing it, but I think it's a fair point, which is, there hasn't really been, at least from my standpoint, and I think a lot of my friends share a similar experience, but that education of figuring out how to find care and knowing kind of what to prioritize and where to look and how not to get overwhelmed during the process. I mean, yeah, you're already at a compromised state, and then you're going to have to do this very critical thing of finding care. Like, it's not going to be easy. It's obviously going to take some practice to do. And you haven't necessarily been taught how to do that previously because, you've been for most people, under the protection of their parents. Maybe the parents are helping them find a doctor. So, for the first time, you're alone, and maybe doing laundry is hard enough, but there are no tools at the moment that help students navigate this process. And, the least that we can do is, healthcare is a very personal thing, but the least that we can do is at least provide a framework of just information where, everyone who goes to Michigan is incredibly intelligent and they're going to be able to make the right set of decisions if they have the correct information. So it's kind of about asking the right questions and knowing, which information to prioritize. And that's what Compass is all about. So I think that's the big thing, sure. Like obviously you're always going to need some level of help from other people. Like that's not, it's not to say that we're trying to replace that. But students are told to be independent. They're meant to be independent, yet there's no support in this one area. And I think that's why it's so important.
And I think one thing I want to touch on too is that there's also, I think, a lot of value in having a centralized database like healthcare from an institutional perspective, right? If you think like from the perspective of, university administrators, right? I talked about it like a minute ago, but again, what we kind of saw with students from the get-go of starting Compass is that, okay, the only places that people realistically go to care is, CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services, UHS, where you go get those physical needs taken care of, and some of the psychological needs. Urgent care down the street, at least for me, it's on Packard, which always has a very long wait, but again, still you can usually get something same day, right? And then finally, usually just not seeking care at all, right? Which is the most common thing that college students do, which is very sad for me to see, right? I've done it myself. And, with conversation with administrators, we've kind of, validated this. I think they realize that this is an issue as well. And, kind of what's happening with all these students going to these catch-all resources, they're all missing out on the opportunity to take advantage of maybe lesser known but better fitting resources. Like resource navigators, for example, through the Office of Student Life. These are, living, breathing human beings whose job it is to make sure you kind of get routed to the care you need, right? There's wellness coaches as well, which isn't exactly a therapist, but again, it's something Michigan provides to kind of help you lead a healthier lifestyle, whether you want to figure out a nutritional plan, or get on a better sleep schedule, they'll kind of help you craft a personal plan yourself, right? And I feel like a lot of these resources, that are lesser known are preventative and would prevent you from having to eventually go to CAPS or UHS or urgent care, right? So that's the other kind of factor there. So in terms of like, again, from an institutional perspective, I think allowing students to be able to discover these resources, these lesser known resources more easily allows them to be utilized more, right? And kind of get more bang for your buck in terms of what you're spending on these resources, right? So again, that's kind of what we've been looking at through the lens of not only does this help students, but it also helps administrators in the institution whose, again, his sole mission is to kind of help the students, navigate college in a really healthy way.
And also, well, quickly just expanding a little bit on the Grant's point on the preventative aspect of care and like tying that in with the public health perspective. One of the big things that Compass does is it helps like reduce some of the barriers to getting care in the first place. One of those factors being like the amount of time and steps you have to take to figure out what care you need. And so if students have more understanding of like finding care a lot easier, they're more likely to actually go use it in a preventative method instead of just like waiting until you actually absolutely have to find care and then, struggling and scrambling at the last minute. And so it's definitely much more of a preventative approach that allows students to be more proactive than reactive to their care.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
So one thing that's important that Grant brought up, and I really want to emphasize this a little bit more, which is you can also look at it from a portfolio management standpoint, which is the university spends millions of dollars every year on countless resources. Can, maybe for like the large ones, the well-established ones, it's pretty clear to see what the return is. But for some of the smaller resources, it may be a little bit harder to figure out what that ROI is, and on a specific resource that the university funds. So, the university has more than 100 resources on campus to help students out as to, are they all being utilized right? Are they all being effective? Would it make sense to consolidate some of these resources? Those are questions that, a portfolio manager could ask. And I think Compass is a start in helping aggregate some of that information to help make those decisions at a higher level. So I think this is the beauty of Compass, which is that right now, it's a product really for the student. But in the future, there's a potential for having enough information and enough, intelligence on this platform where we can help influence in a positive way decisions that are made about Michigan's student healthcare ecosystem based on student-fed data and student sentiment. So instead of seeing it from a purely financial standpoint, or just a, we're just going to write this off, we're going to have 100 resources and hope for the best, or we're just going to, if a department needs more money, we'll just provide it to them, and maybe we'll take some money from someone else. So instead of having that kind of, I think, not growth mindset attitude when it comes to funding these resources, you can have enough information on this platform to be a little bit more critical in your decision making. So I think that's like, in terms of future, or in terms of, how I see this benefiting people outside of students, I think we're kind of sitting on like a golden egg here.
Absolutely. I want to hammer in that whole thing about future. I think you tied really well into my next question, which is kind of, if you want to talk about the current state of Compass, and I guess a little bit more into those hopes of the future, what you're doing. And I know, Grant, you talked about it at the start a little bit, like what you're doing now to maybe kind of ensure Compass's longevity.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can talk about it from a product standpoint first. Where Compass now, quite literally, allows you to search by any query and kind of get a batch of results for resources that would be best for what you're searching for, right? And you can filter down those results a little bit. We also have each resource that's kind of displayed in a card format, with tags that easily surface, things that students care about when trying to seek out a resource, right? And I think what we have now is already enormously better than kind of, manually filtering through a bunch of different university websites, or, the current university offering, for some kind of, they'll have a web page that's just filled with a bunch of links, right? And not really a lot of context behind those links. I think what we have now is already a lot better than that. That being said, I still think it can always be better, right? And that's what we're constantly thinking of. And I think into the future, from a product standpoint, we want to, guide the user even more to kind of recommendations, or kind of, suggestions for where they should seek care, right? There's a lot of ways this could look, right? And kind of we're actively thinking about it. But, I think, again, making sure, when the student starts seeking care, we reduce the amount of time it takes them to kind of, figure out the best places to go, right? And again, we're kind of thinking about a lot of ways to do that. And I think that's what, a future new product on the platform will look like, is, a different way to kind of surface these results, right? And kind of, refine the results that you're getting. In terms of like, ensuring Compass's longevity, maybe I can let Kish talk a little bit more on this. But I think the broader goal we have here is to make sure that this is available for free to students, right? We never plan on charging students anything, right? And making sure it's available to as many students as possible for as long as possible, right? And Kish, maybe you can talk a little more about like, the specific strategy we have here.
Sure. So I'll be brief. I think it's two things: free and fresh, where we need to make sure that this data is accessible and our platform is accessible, great user interface, blah, blah, blah. Not to trivialize. I shouldn't use the word blah, 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 but you get my point, right? Like what I'm saying is, we have a lot of value. We want to make sure that value is accessible to students. We don't want to jeopardize that in any sort of way. So that's number one. But the second thing is that, to be fully transparent with you, Carter, there's a shelf life to the data that's on our platform right now, because things are liable to change. In 5 years' time, frankly, I don't think any of us can really predict what changes are going to happen to our data. From something as simple to, like, say, the name or the location of a resource changes, to the creation of a new resource. Maybe there are more telehealth options, things like this. So we need to figure out a way to kind of make that a little bit more permanent. Right now, it's a pretty manual effort to get the data on the platform. We need to figure out, I think, some more intelligent ways to keep things up to date. But then from a longevity standpoint, without getting too much into the weeds, I think that we need to make sure that this product remains affiliated with the University of Michigan in some way or the other. Grant and I are going to be alums very soon, and the alumni affiliation, in my humble opinion, and maybe the others on this podcast can disagree with me, but I don't think that's necessarily strong enough to really make sure that our brand is as strong as it can be. So I think that we're going to have to figure out some other way to create an affiliation with the university, outside of the fact that, we come to some football games as alumni and have the UMich email. I don't think that's it. So I think, without revealing too much and without getting too much into the weeds, those are the conversations that we're starting to have now in terms of longevity, which is, how do we make sure that this product is able to maintain fresh data? The free aspect is relatively straightforward, because, we have to make a conscious decision to change that right now. But the unknown, and what we're trying to figure out right now, is really how do we, get a more permanent and a more robust affiliation with the university in some way or the other.
Yeah. And kind of to touch on that a little little more, right? There's two big reasons that we've always wanted to collaborate with the university in some way, right? The first is that, working directly with the university directly increases the quality of the platform, I think, right? I think the data we've collected already, we've done a lot. It's been a labor of love to make sure that it's as accurate as possible, as detailed as possible, right? It accurately represents what the resource offers to students, right? But again, Kish talks about the shelf life where, the data becomes stale, right? And it's just not very maintainable at scale for us to kind of go back every month or two and kind of manually check for changes, right? And I think, the best thing that we can do is engage the resource owners directly, right? On a consistent basis to make sure that their resource is being, kind of advertised in a sense, the way that they want it to be shown to students, right? I think that's always the most responsible thing too. And I think collaborating with the university directly will allow us to do that, right? And again, the second part is kind of making sure it's able to stay, in the Michigan realm for as long as possible and help students, right? And I think that's the second way, I think a collaboration, would help Compass directly, kind of help Compass help students. Is again, the university would be able to, show that this is affiliated directly. People would be able to trust it because it's affiliated with the university. And again, I think it would just be able to stick around for a lot longer, right? Which is kind of the overarching goal, at least that Kish and I had when we started this. We'd love to, work on a little project and, release it to the world and see how everyone likes it, right? But, at the end of the day, we really wanted to stick around and be a lasting kind of, contributor to the community, right? So again, I think those are kind of the two ways, that the two reasons mainly that we've always wanted to work with the university in some fashion.
Absolutely. It makes complete sense, and I really hope and wish the best for the future of Compass. I know it's such a great initiative, and I'm hopeful and I think confident that it will have a life that lasts long beyond, I think, anybody's time here at school, which is really exciting. Now, I'm really curious for all three of you, do you have one of the toughest moments that you can think of when creating Compass, and also maybe one of the most rewarding ones?
Oh, this is a good question. Let me think. There were quite a few tough moments in the early days, I think. I think when one of my favorite quotes relating to startups, of course, I don't remember who said it. It was probably just a tweet, to be honest, which is not that sophisticated. But someone compared starting a startup to walking on hot coals while chewing on glass, staring into the abyss of the universe. And I honestly kind of agreed with it because I feel like for, the first 3 quarters of us working on Compass, we had a general idea of how, useful it would be. We had a lot of faith in the product, but we kind of felt like we were flying in the dark a little bit, right? And then for that final quarter, as we, started getting user testing interviews and getting really good feedback from students, I think that's when we realized, okay, this actually, we felt a little validated and kind of, the core assumptions we made into making this product, right? So that's on a macro level how I felt, right? And in the last month or two has been really rewarding, especially, kind of being able to release it and see people actually use it and see utility in it, right? To single out a toughest moment, that's tough. I'm trying to think. I think one of the toughest moments that I had, and probably maybe Kish, I might be stealing Kishor's answer, hopefully not, but when one of the big parts of the platform that we've also been working on is a method for, resource owners to directly edit the data, right? And the idea of what we wanted, is to allow resource owners to log into a Compass profile, and to view all the resources they're attached to and be able to edit the data directly, right? And we wanted to do this so that the data can be as accurate as it can be, right? And so we can engage the university even more, right? And, one of the first kind of resource owners that we met with, we kind of, showed them this idea. He loved the core platform, right? And then we kind of showed him the idea about, okay, as an administrator, you can log in and edit the data. And he was very blunt in saying that, listen, Grant, he said, I remember this. He's like, the university will never, ever, ever do this unless you have the rubber stamp of their, affiliation, right? And no resource owner will ever be able to edit their data because they need to check with the university first. And, this is an external platform, right? And at that point, I was like, oh my Lord, like I've like made, wrong judgment calls before, but we committed a lot of resources towards this strategy specifically. And, in a span of like 15 seconds, he had completely like crushed that idea. And I was talking to Kishor afterwards. I was like, I have never been more off base probably with any business related thing my entire life. Right. And that's kind of when we had to, rejigger our strategy a little bit. Right. And figure out, okay, we might not be able to engage them directly. Right. But how can we engage them indirectly to make sure this data is accurate? Right. So that was a long lead up to that one, but was definitely like a learning moment for us. And I think the most rewarding part was, I'm trying to think, there was this, I think like shortly after we launched Compass, which was like a month ago, someone, one of my friends, I was talking with, I hadn't actually talked to them in a while. And, we'd all gotten, the formal, congratulations from people, right? Oh, this is so cool, right? Everything looks super good. But the most, rewarding, piece of, kind of praise that I got was, this is so useful. Like there's actual utility in this, and I am going to use this. And I think that was the best compliment I had ever gotten, right? Because it's nice to make something shiny and new, right? But I think the core of what I wanted is for it to be useful for students, right? And that was like a very rewarding thing to hear. So that was definitely like toughest moment and, most rewarding moment for me. Sorry, I just took up, probably a lot of that time. I want to hear from Kish and Aparna though.
Sure. Yes, you did steal my, well, I think I have two toughest moments, one of them is a product and product based. And yes, that one where we had this meeting and he says, yeah, kids, good product. However, I mean, we're not going to touch this with a barge pole unless it's university affiliated for liability reasons. And I was like, oh shoot, probably should have thought of that. Also these resources aren't necessarily super interested in getting all this marketing to the same extent. Maybe it's not the number one priority for them. So what's the incentive for them to go out of their way to put information on our platform, plus the liability aspect? It just opened up my eyes to a different way of thinking, that I didn't imagine these resources to think like this. Their objectives are very different. So yeah, that was pretty tough. I think in terms of rewarding moment, releasing it to the public and the reception of it, I think that was super validating. Obviously, we've done enough background research and we've done a bunch of one-on-one user interviews to validate the product at kind of at kind of an academic level, if you want to say that. But actually releasing it in public and hearing people's overwhelmingly positive criticism, all good compliments, and that's probably been the most rewarding thing. And then on a non-product difficult thing, I would say it's like and I mentioned this earlier, and Grant knows this about me, but I'm all about responsibility, right? So it's like at the end of the day, there are a million things that all of us can do on campus, and some things we need to just simply prioritize over others. Some people like you, Carter, go out of their way to make podcasts when other people maybe do other things. So there were definitely times where I was quite overwhelmed with my work and realized that, hey, I need to make sure that I'm honest with everyone on the team about what I'm going to try and prioritize, right? And time after time, the beautiful thing was that answer happened to be Compass. And, I've stayed from that angle. I've stayed quote unquote faithful, right? I've made sure to make this a priority. But of course there are times where it's tough, where you have a bunch of exams. Like I'm a dual degree engineering student. I have a bunch of other stuff going on in my life where it's like, hey man, this is not necessarily like, should I really be prioritizing this right now? And the answer in my gut was always yes. But the amount of gut checks that I had to go through, I think was at some times really tough. But the biggest gut check was this darn conversation we had with the administrator about how, our whole profile method that I don't know, I think Grant and I can split the responsibility on that one. Like we were at, I think, Argus talking about this idea, and we're like, this is gonna be great. It's gonna be like a social media platform. We're gonna get these guys onboarded. They're gonna own their piece. There's gonna be ownership involved. The minute there's ownership involved, like people get excited about the product. No, 0 out of 10. That conversation destroyed it all. So that was very demoralizing. But at the same time, it taught us how to get hit and keep moving forward, because Compass is still out there and the information on there is pretty pristine. So we figured out how to pivot, even though like the carpet was literally yanked underneath our feet.
Yeah, and I think I have similar thoughts as to what Grant and Kishor already shared. But I think another angle, I guess, at looking at a challenge was like, because Compass is a very centralized platform and we have resources from a variety of different areas of the university in one area, trying to find maybe exactly the home for Compass, so like where exactly it would stay, was definitely a challenge that we've kind of asked ourselves and had a lot of conversations and, received rejections from, and then had to like rethink exactly our strategies. Definitely been a challenge, especially, we're trying to like navigate the problem of a decentralized system, which is a problem that Compass is trying to solve in the first place. So that's been definitely a challenge, I would say, but it's also been really interesting to see all the ideas that we've been coming up with of trying to re-strategize and the successes of that as well. And I also would echo that I think releasing the platform and getting to see everyone's feedback has definitely been the most rewarding, to see like all the hard work that we've put in. Actually, people actually finding it useful. It's definitely been amazing.
I'm so glad. I've loved listening to all the things you've said about Compass. I kind of forgot that I had to host this podcast and was just engrossed in all this conversation, everything you had to say. So it's such an amazing platform, and it's such a useful platform, and I am truly so excited to see where it goes and where all of you are going. Now, with the little time we have left, I'd love to ask a couple kind of more rapid fire fun questions I love asking everybody here on the show. And I will just start off with, what is the most impactful piece of advice that somebody ever gave to you?
I got it. Take your work seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. And I think that allows you to have humility. That allows you not to, in the Gen Z English, it allows you not to tweak. I just think it's a good way to live life, and you produce stellar work, and you get the job done, and you're able to be super creative. So I think that's kind of one of the many secret sauces to life.
Best piece of advice that I got from my dad, at least, was do things that scare the shit out of you. I think like coming to Michigan was, a little scary for me because I went to a very small high school, right? Launching this like baby of a product out into the public for it to be judged, criticized, potentially, was also absolutely terrifying, right? But it's been worth it, right? Because I think it's helping people a lot. And it's helped me grow a lot too, so do things that scare you.
And I think for me, it's like you're the average of all the people that you surround yourself with. So prioritizing surrounding yourself with a diverse group of people that are different than you has definitely been something that I've taken to heart.
I love all three pieces of advice. I think they all kind of have a great like intersection with each other too. So that's all wonderful tips for sure. Now, I love building a little like basically a music playlist out of this podcast of like school survival songs. And I'm curious if any of you have a song you'd like to add that basically got you through a period of school.
I'm horrible at remembering song names, so I'm looking through my playlist right now. Oh, what got me through COVID? I'm trying to look. Oh no.
I'm big into salsa music. So there's a song called Llorarás by Oscar de Leon. And it's like the lyrics are objectively sad, but everyone dances to the song. I think it's a happy song. So I would say that one, it's a classic. You go to any salsa party, they'll play it. And yeah, I would just listen to that, every now and then. It would cheer me up.
Mine's a very different answer, but also had the same effect on me, right? I'm a very big like techno and electronic music fan. So like One More Time by Daft Punk was like a key staple for me, at least during COVID too, when I needed to be motivated to do like one more exam or one more homework assignment. But also is a fun song, right? But
it is.
And I'd say maybe Tusa. It's like a Spanish song with Karol G and Nicki Minaj. That was like right before COVID hit. Like I got into it, so that was like the COVID song, I'd say, for me.
That's really fun. Now I love hearing everybody's song choices and how everybody's is so different, and it's such a fun thing to have and to hear. For the last question of the interview, I'd love to ask all of you, what would you tell your freshman self in high school and your first year selves in college?
Oh gosh, you got some good rapid fire questions. Freshman year in high school, I would tell myself, no one cares about where you go to college. They just care what you do with it, right? And I feel like, again, it's a very classic, at least I when I got to high school, like my sights were immediately set on college, right? So, and I think that's the case with a lot of other students who go to Michigan because we're all very high achieving, former high school students. So yeah, I think that's that advice I'd give my high school self. Advice I'd give my freshman college self. Oh my. I think it kind of echoes Kish's initial advice, which is like, do not take yourself seriously, right? I feel like I very much got wrapped up in my work, like my freshman and sophomore years at Michigan, to the point that it like affected my well-being, right? And I think I would have reminded myself that, my freshman year self, that it's not that serious and that you do need to like enjoy life and go, touch grass, go to like a basketball game on a Wednesday, right? Like really have fun. Cause like at the end of the day, like if you're working this hard, but have nothing to, what are you working for? You kind of have to remind yourself, right? So definitely advice I give my freshman year of college self as well.
Yeah, those are really great pieces of advice. I love both of those. I think it's very important. I definitely feel, and I think everybody here on this call, being a U of M feels that like very early in high school, the college pressure was definitely real. Like it was all like self-induced college pressure.
Oh yeah.
But it was there, and it is strong for sure.
Yeah, I'd say I also have something similar for like high school, is like be open to having new experiences, because I never would have thought that I'd be doing the things I'm doing now back then. So like not stressing about it would be something I'd tell myself. And then for my freshman year of college, I'd say don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think that ties into Compass as well, of like knowing when you need help and being okay with asking for it when you need it.
It absolutely does. The synergy is on point. Kishor, do you have anything that you've thought of?
Yeah, it's actually kind of conflicting pieces of advice.
Oh, great. Love that.
But it makes sense because you grow, right? In high school, you grow. High school, there was always this pressure to be, just unnecessarily rebellious, those types of things. And I think that a lot of that was unproductive. And I think most people, at least in the U.S., who go to high school in the U.S., experience that. A lot of time kind of gets, I think, some more or less wasted in individuality and soul searching. And I think it's important to an extent. But my advice would have been, don't be afraid to just choose what you're passionate about and just pursue that, and kind of make that your mission, as opposed to, again, there are entire movie genres on teen angst, right? So I think I don't need to belabor this point. So that would be my advice in high school, and I think my advice in college would be, don't forget who you are and where you came from and what you're in it for. I think I don't know why this is. I'm sure it happens at many colleges, but I've just learned at Michigan that a lot of people get into some sort of tempo, some sort of rhythm, and unlike high school, there's the pressure to conform. I mean, main point is, don't forget what you're passionate about. Be bold. Don't worry about needing to conform. Of course, if everyone's going in one direction and you're going in the other direction, you better have a pretty good reason to do that. So listen to your friends, but at the same time, if you find something interesting, then pursue that relentlessly, and I think things will happen for you. My interests are very unique, as are Grant's, and I think that if we weren't bold, then we wouldn't be able to materialize much at all. We would, I think we would be content, but I don't think we would be truly happy. So I think that's the biggest thing, which is, don't forget who you are. We're all, I apologize for using these types of words, but we're all very capable of some badass stuff. But we might forget that from time to time, when we get roped into the daily swing of things, and when people try or when either courses or some event comes and tries to beat us down, we kind of forget to put things into perspective. So I would say that's that. Just be true to yourself, be unapologetic about who you are and what your interests are, and don't, if a lane doesn't fit you, find another lane, or break down the lane. Don't become smaller and try and fit it.
Amazing. Those are all truly wonderful pieces of advice, and I appreciate hearing all of them. The final question I have to ask all of you is, do you have anything to plug and share and promote? Of course, there's Compass, but is there anything else you'd like to share?
Ooh, that's a good question also.
I would say check out Blueprints. All three of us were involved or are involved in that organization. Blueprints for Pangeas is, it's kind of shocking to think that college students are providing that much impact to the world. It's truly a high performing organization. I mean that. So we can provide you some of the copy for that. We can provide you the link, maybe some people to talk to at Michigan. But I'm sure that a lot of people are listening to this podcast, and Blueprints for Pangea has locations across the country. So it's obviously, as there's a Michigan focus and it's headquartered here, but there's definitely a presence in our country. So definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, and to give some color to what Kishor's talking about in terms of impact that Blueprints has, over its lifetime, students in Blueprints have sent $6 million worth of supplies overseas to places in need, million with a capital M, which is unbelievable, right? And again, it's kind of scary looking back that I, indirectly had that much responsibility, right? But again, that is what college is about, is kind of getting into these real world situations and making a big impact, right? So again, can't plug and praise Blueprints enough.
I echo everything they just said.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, incredible. I know I had not heard about it until we started this call, but I will have to go check out Blueprints. So that seems like such a cool organization. So that's amazing. Now, thank you to all three of you for coming on today. It has been a joy and a pleasure to talk to all of you. It was kind of like the moment I heard about Compass and the moment I saw this, I was like, I gotta talk to these people. And I think, Kishor, from the first time I met you, I'm like, okay, this man is built for a podcast of some capacity. And I feel like I need to take all of the wisdom that you kind of just spout out all of the time and at least put a little bit of it on some kind of record. So, and that goes for all three of you after this call. It's so great to hear from all of you. As I said, I kind of was just engaged so much in everything that you were talking about that I forgot that I also have a job to do here and and have to ask questions. I was just this is amazing. So thank you so much. I cannot sing any more of your praises. Thank you to the listener for listening to this episode. I hope you found it as interesting and informative as I did. I'm sure you did. So until next time, I've been Carter Dvorak. That has been Kishor, Grant, and Aparna. Do you have any other final words before we head out of here?
Yes, just thank you for your time, Carter. We really appreciate it, and the pleasure has been ours on this podcast. I mean, my goodness, how much fun is it to talk about something that we're so passionate about? I rarely get that opportunity to do that. So thank you for making this Friday, I think, one of the better Fridays of of the year, honestly.
Yeah, no, agree with everything Kishor has to say. Thank you so much, Carter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's my favorite thing in the world to hear people talk about the things they're passionate about. It's kind of my whole thing. So I love it so much. Now, listener, if you want to find our show and engage with it more, first, totally go engage with Compass. Totally look at all of the links we have for them in the description here. Once you're done doing that, if you want to check us out, our Instagram is @StucoPod and our email is stucopod@gmail.com. Those are big ways to reach out if you have guest suggestions or recommendations or anything else you want to share. Totally hit us on all those platforms. Wishing you the best of luck and the best of times in all of your educational endeavors. Student Council is adjourned.